Hello, welcome to the Raw podcast. James and Phil here from the Sunderland Echo. We're going to have a little look and a little reaction to Sunderland's 3-1 win over Plymouth at the Stadium of Light in the Championship over the weekend. But firstly, Phil, how are you this afternoon as we are recording?
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, it feels quite nice, doesn't it? It feels like there's a little bit of positivity, a bit of optimism back after a pretty acrimonious start of 2024, I think. So, yeah, looking forward to the rest of the week. Really, it feels like a big one in the context of the season.
I was having a look at, so this is a complete tangent early on, but I was having a look at social media this morning and it's all Taylor Swift and Super Bowl. You don't strike me as a massive NFL guy or a Swiftie. Is that true?
I'm more of a Swiftie than an NFL, I would say.
Yeah, I struggle with the NFL, to be honest. Two-stop starting.
It's a mystery to me, but yeah, Taylor Swift, a couple of glasses of wine. I don't mind singing a bit of Taylor Swift. I'll reveal that to our listeners. I would go as far as to say I'm a Swiftie, but not averse to the charms. No,
there's an appreciation there.
Yeah, that's fair to say, I think.
Cool. Right. So we'll move on.
To interesting insight for everyone there. That I'm sure
it's a departure from the norm, isn't it? It's a departure from the norm. Yeah, I'm just going to be picturing Phil Smith with his record player listening to Taylor Swift with a glass of wine all day now. You've ruined it.
There's a thought for our listeners.
Yeah. So anyway, we digress. Plymouth Argyle. I want to start, Phil, just by sort of pointing out and saying that I think that game, with the context around it and the reaction Michael Beale had from Sunderland fans to the news, unfortunate news about his niece Poppy and her health issues, which he shared on social media and were sort of picked up on. And it just goes to show, doesn't it, Phil? Obviously, he's come in, he's had a hard time. He said some stuff in the media, which a lot of Sunderland fans will never agree with. But in this context now we know what we now know. You can sort of understand and respect him really for coming out swinging in a way. And it's a lesson, isn't it, that sometimes we don't always know what's going on, beneath the surface. It was a stressful moment for him coming into a new job, a stressful family situation. Obviously, Sunderland's form had dipped. There was a lot of, noise around the club. There was a lot of ex-Rangers pundits, completely flying into him on TalkSport and whatnot. So a difficult time for him. But thankfully, Sunderland seem to have come out of the other side of it for the moment. And so does Michael Beale with 7 points in 3 games.
Yeah, I think it probably is a reminder, I think, as you say, that not just head coaches, players, everyone in football really, who we sort of judge on a daily basis, that we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, I guess. And, they are human beings just like we are. And you should always bear that in mind, I think, when you fairly sort of discuss. And what I would say is, even in the very acrimonious moments, Michael Beale always said that, I have no problem being judged on football and people having opinions on the football team. That was never an issue. He very, very much disagreed with some people's assessments of his football team and the performances, but he'd be the first to say that's life. That's the beauty of football. So probably an important distinction there. And as you say, really, I guess, a reminder to us all that we got to be careful when, as you say, when we judge these people, because they are ultimately human beings. But I wasn't in any way surprised by what happened on Saturday. I was very, very moved about it. I thought it was a really sort of tender, poignant moment, and it was the equivalent of a big hug for Michael Beale, wasn't it? Really, and you could tell that he was really moved by that show of support. I think he felt how genuine and heartfelt it was, and it was something that I think, regardless of the football, regardless of the context of Sunderland, the season, any of that stuff, I think it was just something that meant an awful lot to him, and he was very emotional, not just during the game, but when he spoke to us after as well. So, yeah, I thought it was a really sort of tender moment. It meant a lot to him, I think, and it was it was more important than the result on the day, wasn't it? I think, and yeah, a very, very powerful thing. And needless to say, we wish Michael and his family all the very best moving forward through what I'm sure is going to be a really challenging time for them.
No, absolutely echo those sentiments. I don't want to dwell on this point too long, Phil, but it just feels now, that there's the sort of the beginnings of a relationship between Sunderland fans and Michael Beale. I think a lot of Sunderland fans were always happy to reserve judgment. Absolutely, he was always going to get a fair crack of the whip, but there was various external factors and whatnot. But now it feels like there's something tangible. Now it's like, right, you're one of us. Like once you're a Sunderland head coach, you're sort of in with us and we'll support you, especially through the dark times. And I was wondering after his comments in the media, sort of where's the way back from? How's this relationship going to develop? And I just think this is, it's so important on a human level and for his relationship with the fans, which ultimately is massively important, because you look at recent history and Tony Mowbray had an excellent connection with Sunderland fans, and I think that certainly helped his career when he was here.
Yeah, I think it's something that we said before, is that it's really important at a club of Sunderland's size, and because of the intensity and the emotion and the scale of the courage and what have you, it is really important that the head coach or the manager, or whatever the sort of latest term that gets used for that role is, has a connection with the supporters. And I think that I think there's a couple of aspects to it. I do think Beale seems to have settled a little bit into the role. I think that's it. I think that's an important part of it. It was a strange scenario for him to come in. This is something we mentioned on the podcast at the time, that coming in with absolutely no staff of his own was highly unusual, I think. Maybe left him feeling quite isolated in the early weeks of his tenure. The derby was a bad time for that game and everything that went around it. We rightly criticised the performance, as I think we were more than entitled to do so, because it was nowhere near good enough, even accounting for there were all these factors. And I just think, maybe is it because he's had time now to get to know the players and he's been able to show his work on the training ground a little bit? Is it just the fact that he's had a couple of good results? Is it the fact that, a few of the issues on the pitch are getting better? Rooson's really starting to look like a menace to me. Yedlin's had a really good start. For whatever reason, it feels to me like he's settled into the role a little bit. And I think maybe the reason why, even aside from what happened on Saturday, maybe the reason why supporters are finding it a little bit easier to connect with him now is because he does seem a little bit more relaxed, and maybe it's a little bit, it feels a little bit easier to connect with him, and maybe that goes both ways as well. What I would say is
results help.
Well, what I was going to say is that, if we accept that the intensity of the first few weeks was highly unusual because of everything that was going on, we probably shouldn't swing too far the other way in terms of results and performances, because let's be honest, the second half was fantastic on Saturday. The first half was dreadful. The first half was okay against Middlesbrough, and the second half was absolutely dreadful. Stoke, I thought they deserved to win, but Stoke had 3 big chances to take the lead in that game. So while I'm very encouraged by some of what we're seeing, I think it's also important that we don't swing too far the other way and start looking at trains for Wembley, because at the moment we're still, in my opinion, we're still waiting for, and this isn't a Michael Beale thing, by the way, this is just a Sunderland thing, we're still waiting for this team to deliver a string of coherent performances, I would say, across 90 minutes, where you start to go, all right, okay, we can really get behind this. We're seeing flashes of some really good stuff, and all the things I've alluded to there, but I'm not getting too carried away on the basis of a brilliant 20 minutes, because we know this team has that in them. It's, can they keep doing it? That's the question. And so that's what makes this next 3 or 4 games really interesting, because theoretically they're relatively generous fixtures for Sunderland. It's a real opportunity now to put the foot down and really start to build some momentum going in the back end of the season. So I'm going to be really interested to see how they sort of rise to that challenge.
What do you put that inconsistency down to in games, Phil? Is it inexperience? I think one of the pleasing things for me in terms of that lack of consistency, or I mean, you could swing it the other way as well, I suppose, is that yes, against Middlesbrough, Sunderland were pretty abject for most of the second half, but when Michael Beale did get them to the sideline, he seemed to give them a G up, and Sunderland responded. And you could say the same against Plymouth, that they went in for half time and Michael Beale managed to get something out of them to rise them. You could flip that the other way and say, why were the rubbish at half time coming out for the second half at the Riverside? But is it an experience? A lot of championship teams are like this, I feel sometimes, Phil.
Yeah.
It really is the best ones that do put those consistent 90 minutes. And when we look at Sunderland, we're always very, very harsh. Even just to go off on a tangent again, just the striker thing. It's like, how many teams up and down the Championship, you watch them on Sky Sports and, the pundit goes, well, they need a striker. And you think, maybe it's not just us.
Yeah. I think that, well, it's really difficult to know what to put it down to. I have a few sort of theories, which might be absolute rubbish. I've no idea, but I'll put them out there for our listeners to judge. I mean, maybe part of it is because there's so little between the teams from 5th to probably like 17th in the Championship. Maybe it's inevitable. Maybe it's part of that slightly bumpy transition between head coaches and Beale putting his own ideas across and his tweaks from what Mowbray was doing. You do get the impression he wants something to be a bit more direct, to cross more, to play forward quicker and earlier. So maybe it's just kind of that unease and that adjustment. I do feel like, having watched this team over the last 18 months, sometimes it feels to me as if when it's a big game, big crowd, really high quality opponent, it feels like it's really easy for them to get up for the game and to perform at a really high level and find that intensity. Maybe because it's such a young team and they don't have that experience and they haven't got that know-how, if you like, of how you get promoted and win leagues and all that kind of stuff. Maybe they haven't yet found the answer for how you produce that level of intensity when you're expected to win, or when there isn't as much hype around the game. Or, you think back to games last year, for example, like the 0-0 draw against Burnley, the brilliant win at West Brom, and thinking back to this season, the wins over Leeds and West Brom at home. When there's a lot of attention and there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of intensity, they really rise to it because they're good enough. We know that their talent is really high. Maybe as a young group, they're learning the hard way about how important it is to find that level within yourself, when it's not there naturally because of the game. And Wednesday night is going to be another really interesting test, after the high of the win at the weekend, going away from home. I'm sure, looking at the forecast, it's not going to be a particularly nice night in Huddersfield, a team fighting for their lives. Can they go and do it again? Can they find that level and that intensity? I think that's going to be really interesting.
Just to move on to specifics in the game, Joe Bellingham rested. Great reaction from him coming on to score. That meant Abdullah Bar in the middle. I think Joe being rested is something people have been able to see for a little while, but I thought it was brilliant the way he responded because, it's about mentality, isn't it? And some players could get disheartened. But, hopefully Michael Beale said to him, look, you're not being dropped because of your poor performances. I just need you to come on and affect the game in the second half. And he really, really did that with an excellent goal. Thoughts on that and thoughts on that sort of midfield trio with Bar coming into a more central position?
Yeah. Well, and firstly, what you mentioned there is that, Beale told us in the press conference after that he'd had that conversation on Thursday, not just with Joe, but with the midfielders, to basically tell them that, you're going to be sharing the load this week. We've got 3 games in 7 days. And so It was certainly made very clear that was a rest and rotation thing rather than a selection thing. I did think Job's response was excellent. What I would also say is it's a great example as well in terms of putting players in the pitch when the circumstances are right. I mean, we've talked a lot about Job, and I do think fatigue's been a factor, and I agree with that. But also, sometimes the game doesn't really suit him, I think, in terms of, when you're asking him to play that number 10 role, as we've seen a lot this season, against teams at the Stadium of Light who are playing with quite a low block. I feel like that's quite a new challenge for Job as a player. He's not a Pritchard type, is he, who really thrives on sort of unpicking the lock all the time, if you like. And it was so noticeable that Job, I'm sure the fact that he was coming up a bit fresher against tired legs helped him, but you really saw that what he thrives on is space on the pitch. The way he was able to stretch his legs, the way he was able to really run into the channels, chase things down, press the opposition. It's that kind of performance and that kind of environment where you go, wow, this kid is a really frightening talent. When you're able to see him show that athleticism, and yes, obviously a huge amount of technical quality, which is goal demonstrated as well. But yeah, it was just nice to see him playing as that box-to-box number 8, if you like, in an open game, because when he does that, you can think, my word, this kid really is going places. In terms of Bar, I have to say, I don't quite see it as a 10. Personally, everyone will have their own opinions. I think there's a reason he was moved out onto the wing last summer. I think it's worked really well in the main. I know it's not his preference, and I can understand that, but for me, I just think he looks so much more of a consistent threat out wide. And I do think Sunderland's pressing suffers a bit when he plays through the middle. And I thought we saw that at times in the first half. But yeah, it'll be interesting because we know he wants to play would like to play in more central areas. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. Because for me at the moment, I just think he brings so much more to the team on and off the ball, out wide.
Sticking on the subject of Sunderland's midfield, you were rather impressed with Dan Neil in the second half. I saw you tweeted a little comparison to a certain Barcelona midfielder, Sergio Busquets. He's good, isn't he?
Honestly, like sometimes you just you just watch him and he's the one who, I know Clark's got that, and Clark amazing again, and it's so eye catching, isn't it? Because what he does, but. In my opinion, I often think central midfield's the hardest position to play in football because it's like 360, isn't it? And the intensity of it. And when Dan Neil makes it look so easy sometimes, it's almost frightening. And I think what's incredible about Dan Neil is that when he first broke through, it's something we spoke about quite a lot on this podcast. Straight away, you were like, yeah, he's got it. And he passing, bringing it through the lines, crossfield passes. Like technically, you were like, yeah, cool.
And just the taking responsibility when he's on the pitch as well, because you can have those technical footballers, can't you? But sometimes you get thrown in, and it takes them a while to develop that sort of intensity, responsibility. But with Dan, it was there, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think, but it was like, so he had all that technical stuff, and you were like, yeah, great, amazing talent. But there was nothing to suggest that he was going to be able to do what he did on Saturday, whereby one of the best players in the Championship breaks into space and he just puts his shoulder in and barges him off the ball. Do you know, that intensity and that physicality, that was not in his game when he first broke through. That is just hard work, whether it's in the gym, video analysis, training, speaking to coaches. Dan Neil's one of those players who he has real God-given talent, but actually he's now doing a lot of stuff that isn't God-given talent. It's just hard work. And when you see him produce that kind of all-round performance that he did in the second half, one, it's very, 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 very exciting. And two, it makes you a little bit nervous about the summer. We know there's going to be like big bids for Clark and all that. And, I mean, when I say getting nervous, I do genuinely think Dan Neil is very, very driven to get Sunderland back to the Premier League. I think it would actually be difficult for him to leave. A huge part of his life really has been, I want to get Sunderland back from League One to the Premier League. So I think it would take a lot. I've gone on a complete tangent here anyway, but the point being, you don't see many midfielders in the Championship doing what he does week in, week out. You don't see any at his age, in my opinion. So that just makes me think, wow, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how that develops. But obviously you develop in it sort of an attachment, don't you? As I'm sure fans do as well, because especially because you see their whole careers when they break through. I remember Dan playing in the, I can't remember if it was the Checker Trade or the Rent a Van or the Pizza Cup or whatever it was when he was playing at MK Dons and COVID came on, and and you're sort of thinking, this kid's a really good talent. To see him now to get to the level he's at is absolutely fantastic, and huge credit to him, but also the people around him and the staff at the club as well, really, because he is I think you would have to say he's a shining example, really, of the work they do.
Just you mentioned transfers, Phil, but throwing it forward a little bit to the summer, I've just got Sunderland's sort of team sheet in front of us here. And obviously you want this scenario, really, in a sense. I mean, it's uncomfortable for us fans and journalists, but you want interest in your players. But I'm just looking at it and I'm thinking, well, Clark, there'll be serious interest in him. Ekwa, the type of player he is, the profile, his athleticism, his ability, be interested in him. Dan Neil, certainly. Dan Ballard, Trey Hume, I think is having a superb season. Anthony Patterson, goalkeeper, who's come through the ranks doing really well. There's been sort of links before. If Yedlin keeps up the good form that he's shown in his first two Sunderland games, I'm not saying he'd go anywhere in the summer, but you never know.
Come on, steady.
I know.
Let's not get carried away yet.
My point is that this team is sort of filled with a lot of good players, isn't it, really? And it could make for a pretty interesting summer, isn't it? Obviously, if you asked us honestly, would probably both admit that Clark potentially is likely to go. You would think, if Sunderland don't get to the Premier League, given the money, but the decisions sort of that come after that, whether then a Ballard or a Patterson or a Neil goes as well, you've got to be careful not to sell all up at once, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, I think that we spoke about this, didn't we? I think I wrote a column, it seems a long time ago now, but after Patrick Roberts signed his deal, essentially saying that Sunderland had now got themselves in a position where contractually they were pretty well protected against any player that anybody else would want to sign. Yeah. The importance of that means is that they do not ever for the foreseeable, I would say, next 4 to 5 windows, they do not ever have to be in a situation where they are forced to sell more than one player who's really important to the team. And I agree with you. I think I would say it's likely Clark leaves in the summer if Sunderland don't get promoted. I think that's just the reality of the level he's got to, where his contract is, what would be on offer elsewhere. Don't think it's an acrimonious thing, or
I was going to say,
that needs
actually,
to be.
Probably deserves it.
It's just the reality, I think, of the situation. Now, that what then means is that Sunderland. I don't ever see a scenario where this team gets broken up all at once. I just don't see it. Yeah. Financially, the club is relatively stable, and therefore it doesn't need to just let players go. We saw this a little bit at the end of the summer window, actually, when Stewart was obviously on his way out, and there was a lot of speculation about other players, wasn't there? And you saw then that actually, when it really comes down to it, Sunderland are in a really strong position.
Yeah.
To that extent, it'll therefore be up to the players, really. Do they want to push and say, no, I want this now?
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't really see it, to be honest. I think a lot of the players understand that they're in a really good environment. And, the same way Clark was last summer. I think Clark understood, listen, if I have another really good year in the Championship, then the world's my oyster a bit. And I think it'll be the same for the other young players that you mentioned. So it isn't something that particularly keeps me up at night, to be honest, just in the sense that it is an absolute inevitability that a lot of these players at some point are going to move on. But I think you've got to take some reassurance. You've got to give the club some credit for the fact that the work they have done has massively protected themselves against the scenario where you're suddenly thinking, 4 or 5 could go in one window here. It's just not going to happen. And if, as the scenario that we envisage, if Clark went for a big bid in the summer, it leaves Sunderland in a very, very, very strong position to resist any other advances for their players. It leaves them with a huge challenge to then replace what Clark has done this season in this team. That's for sure.
Yeah, it is very easy to fall into those traps, isn't it? Just particularly thinking of the summer deadline day where you had, I know there was no bid, but you had the talk around Dan Neil. Ross Stewart was on his way out. Danny Bart went, Gooch went, and there was talk about Clark as well. And you sort of sat there thinking, oh my God. But then you actually sort of consider it and think, well, yeah, apart from Ross Stewart, they're all under contract and pretty happy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Yedlin, who I mentioned earlier. 2 games into his Sunderland career, doing pretty well up against Morgan Whittaker, who's a really, really good Championship winger, equipped himself well again.
Yeah, I thought that was a real team effort, actually. I thought Yedlin played really well. Just looks really unfussy, doesn't he? Which is such a good, underrated quality in a footballer, really, that, a guy who hasn't played a huge amount of football this season comes into the 2 challenging games and you don't really talk about him, but in a positive way, just because he looked like, he should be there and it was perfectly natural to him. Again, I thought that was a real collective effort to shackle Whittaker, actually. I thought they played really, really well to stop him getting in space in which he could really hurt teams. You could see the couple of passes he played were absolutely unbelievable. Obviously, the one that Hardy scored from was just sort of first-time pass. He played one switch as well out to the left wing back as well. It was incredible. But generally speaking, Plymouth didn't have too many counter-attacking opportunities. And I thought that was a big tick both for Beale and Sunderland. That wasn't just Yedlin who did really well. That was actually Clark tracking back. That was Dan Neil especially coming over into those little pockets of space on that flank and helping out Yedlin. So it was a really, really, really encouraging performance, I thought. I was really, really... tactically, I thought, although in the first half Sunderland struggled, I thought second half it was really spot on to have that level of attack and threat, but also to really shut down a team who we saw earlier in the season dangerous on the break, and a player of Whittaker's class, and he is class, by the way. I've seen him twice this year, and his ability, I think he is every inch Clark's equal. So, yeah, exciting times.
Just quickly, tomorrow, Sunderland Till I Die comes out, Phil, season 3. The first 2 were a good but grim watch if you lived in the moment, which we all did. I'm sure from a global perspective, it was, thrilling and exciting, but for the people who were close to the coalface, it was reliving a lot of pain. This one, 3 episodes long, actually covers some Sunderland success, which is most welcome.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really nice for everyone, isn't it? Actually, to sort of draw a line under that in a really positive way, and I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a really nice thing as well, because football moves on so quickly, doesn't it? You never really get a chance to sort of, especially the good times, to sort of reflect on them a bit. And I think it'll be really nice to have a few days of nostalgia for that Wembley weekend and the Sheffield Wednesday away game and all that. Because if you think about how quickly we moved on to the Championship campaign and then Alex Neil leaving, and the intensity and the drama around that, just everything just changed immediately, didn't it? And I'm sort of really looking forward to sitting and thinking about that Wembley weekend, because it was an incredible time. That whole real, some pretty poor games of football when Alex Neil came in, just because of what he was doing to get Sunderland out of the league. But there's so much in that little run. If you think about, if you think about Embleton's late winner against Oxford away, Broadhead's late goals, then obviously the Sheffield Wednesday one, which is still one of my absolute favourite nights, being associated with Sunderland, and then Wembley itself. So yeah, I think it's going to be really nice actually to just sort of reflect and dwell on that a little bit long, because we didn't really get to do it at the time, because you just go straight into the next thing. And with Alex Neil leaving so early in the season, it felt like that chapter got closed pretty quickly, didn't it? So yeah, and the thing is, the second series I found a really tough watch for obvious reasons, really. The first one, at least, although there was a lot of pain in terms of what was happening on the pitch, it was they captured Sunderland so well, didn't they? I enjoyed watching the first series, because even though, as you say, it brought back a lot of painful memories, I thought it was it showed Sunderland off so beautifully, didn't it? And I feel like this third series, albeit short, is going to be in the same vein, which is going to be really, really nice. And then obviously with the added bonus that, we're going to be watching Sunderland win at Wembley, which, sign me up. I'm always happy to watch those highlights.
I actually spoke to Ben Turner from Football 73, which is out as a podcast, which you can listen to as well. Just quickly, Phil, I've seen like one or two clips, but I haven't seen the whole thing yet. I've wanted to just sort of experience it organically like everybody else. But I do wonder, because you think back to previous series, who were sort of like the winners and losers in the court of public opinion. So, like, say, for instance, Charlie Methven came out pretty poorly. Josh Maja, when he was leaving, that I don't think that did him too many favours. Jack Ross, I think, by and large, comes out of it quite well. There was the Simon Grayson thing with the tactics board, all of that sort of stuff. I'm really interested to see if this Series 3 could see a little bit of a shift in public opinion from Alex Neil, whether he's featured over that period, whether it's sort of, as you say, jogs people's memories as to sort of the good work that he did to get Sunderland promoted. And then just, the other club figures, Christian Speakman, how's he going to come across? Kira Louis-Dreyfus, who we don't see too much of in the media just generally. How's he going to come across? It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this the other day, because speaking about what we've done before, I went and watched the highlights from the Wickham final, actually. And I was like, oh my God, I had totally forgotten how good Alex Pritchard was in this game. Literally every highlight is him just picking up a little pot. Just, little things like that. It's going to be, really, really interesting to see. So I'm expecting some serious Pritchard nostalgia, which I will be at the absolute forefront of. Yeah.
The Alex Neil celebration, when we get the equaliser on the night, but the winner against the Sheffield Wednesday, that celebration at the time felt like it was going to be this really, really iconic moment, whereby it would be, remembered. But the way Neil then left the club, it's sort of like we forget how brilliant that was to see from a Sunderland manager, because it was class. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I remember his post-match interview as well. Just so like unnecessarily spiky, but just in the best way possible. I'm sure he said like, "Oh, I saw someone predict Chef Wedge were going to win this, so they can stick that in their pipe," and it was just like it was good. No, it was a really good time. It's really interesting. It'll be interesting to see how all that's portrayed, especially because obviously, as people will know from all the stuff that's been done around it, a lot of it's done retrospectively as well. Rather than sort of at the time. So it's going to be really interesting to see what that perspective is. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing the footage again and again and again of Clark just darting outside and then cutting that ball. Oh,
that away end as well. Christ.
It was such an intense night, I think, because the atmosphere in Hillsborough was unbelievable, and Sunderland had actually played so well. And then when Sheffield Wednesday equalised, it was completely against the run of play, but you just felt it's going to be so hard to sort of see this through now, because the atmosphere was amazing. And then, it was so good. I think we might have to do a special nostalgia podcast on that at some point, because what an amazing night that was.
Just to quickly go back to that night, but I think I was listening to Ben Turner's other interview with the Wise Men Say podcast, and he mentioned being there for the Sheffield Wednesday game, and you forget in moments, don't you, when they score and the lights come out and it's like the jokes to the Adele concert afterwards and stuff like that. But anyway, it was a cracking atmosphere. The lights are out there in the ascendancy. I think I was on Twitter screaming for a change, screaming for Patrick Roberts to come off. And you think, and Ben Turner and Gabe Turner mentioned this, where it's like, you know the script here, don't you? Like, you know what's going to happen. Sunderland are going to throw this away, and it's going to be a 5th consecutive season in League One, and then it's just like bang bang goal. And the beauty in that is that it's unexpected, isn't it? It really was unexpected.
I think as well, it's like, so it was so interesting, as you say, with that period with Alex Neil, because obviously you say there made quite a gutsy decision not to make any substitutions. Elliot Embleton didn't kick a ball across those 2 legs in the semi-final.
And then the final, and then he came.
And then from nowhere replaced Jack Clark in the starting lineup, and then scored that goal. You know, it was like everything
crazy, isn't it? Like that on paper now, it's mad.
Everything he touched at that time just came off, didn't he? It's like so interesting to think back to that now, especially in the context of, you know, because he was so good in that period. The football wasn't always fantastic. I think I'm being fair in saying that, but like when he went to Stoke, you just really felt like he was going to be a success there, because football's a funny game, isn't it? You know, and little things like that, when you think back to them, it's just, you know, it's you really can't predict it, and that's, I suppose, what makes it so addictive. I suppose you can't reason it, you can't strip it down and find its logic. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to reliving that period, because it was really, really special. You know, at the end of the 4 years in League One, off the back of COVID as well. You know, and it's something you forget about as well. Wembley wasn't that long after, really.
No.
You know, after COVID, and even the actual physical act of having, you know, 50,000 Sunderland fans all in that space, and it was really, really special. And the thing is, as well, is like, because we were playing Wickham and it was a League One playoff final, we'll never have that again, where you pretty much take over Wembley. Sunderland will go back to Wembley one day and it'll be amazing, but it'll be 50-50.
Yeah.
Because it'll be either a championship playoff final, or let's hope one day a cup semi-final or something like that. But it'll be a 50-50 split, isn't it? You won't ever have that, where it was basically just Sunderland in Wembley. You know, and all those little bits and bobs.
The image of Luke O'Nien during you know, the teams coming out and, like wise men say, kicking off and stuff like that, and him just being sort of like a kid in a sweet shop, like, wow. You know, the national anthem having to be slightly delayed because we wouldn't shoot up.
So good. That was so good.
It was brilliant. And then at the end of the game, one of my favourite moments following Sunderland, covering Sunderland, and I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. If I go back to that moment, I would relive it. Is when you've won it, you're still celebrating, you're still raw, you're still emotional. You know, the crowd's still loud, but then they put Peter Reid and Niall Quinn on the scoreboard, and they show it to Sunderland fans. And that second row, that second, third, or fourth row of the day, was almost louder than the row that we got when the final whistle went. It was just incredible.
Yeah, the whole thing was good. I absolutely loved the Wonderwall karaoke as well. And like, anyone who knows me will
so unexpected.
I am not an Oasis man at all. That was just, it was just so good, wasn't it? It just felt totally perfect, even though, you know, it didn't really make it. And even now, when I hear that song, which I've never particularly loved, to be honest, here and now, it just puts us there, and it's like absolutely amazing. It was such a good day. We even managed to get an Uber just outside Wembley, didn't we? Which remains one of the great miracles of our time.
But to be fair, that was all on you.
Days.
That was all on you,
well,
and we managed to keep your Uber rating up that day as well, which was a miracle.
Yeah. So special times, and I'm really looking forward to reliving all that. Actually, I think it'll be really, really nice for all of us.
No, well, and just very, very quickly, last point. But football is mad, as you say. That, you know, just to throw it back to last season, Alex Neil goes to Stoke. Probably has everything that he wants in terms of money, players, control, autonomy, you know, a say in who he works under in terms of the technical director. And then it all goes so wrong for him. And it's almost like that friction at Sunderland that he may have had, you know, that can sometimes be healthy, can't it, in a way? And too much control, too much autonomy is a bad thing. Just spitballing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think probably one of the things that I've come to take away from that whole process was, it's definitely a vindication to a large extent of what Sunderland are doing. And I do think that what we probably saw in that spell in League One was that in terms of out of possession, organisation, structure, Alex Neil as a coach was way above everybody else he was competing against at that level. Yeah. I think that when you look back now, I think that's so obvious that just he is one of the best out of possession coaches, I think, going outside the Premier League. And at League One level, he was just, it was no contest. It was no contest. And I think that at Championship, it's a bit more of a level playing field, isn't it? And, what we may be seeing is then again, when it's a bit more of a level playing field, that's when you when your recruitment becomes so vital, isn't it? And you have to say that for all our occasional frustrations, the model that Sunderland have in place, I don't think anyone could argue is that they don't find good players.
Absolutely.
That's one thing that they consistently do. So yeah, that's another one. We'll put that on the list as well. There's a special podcast on Alex Neil and the model and all that kind of stuff. We can do that another day as well, because that'd be a good one to get into.
We've managed to get through a whole podcast without not mentioning strikers. Brilliant, fantastic.
Rayson was really good. Rayson was really good. I thought that was the most connected he looked to the team. There wasn't any really flashy moments, but I thought, he looked like really at ease playing in that 11 on Saturday. First time, I think. Even when he's impressed before, it's felt like he's a bit off the cuff. Just his ability shining through or whatever. So that's really exciting. If we can build on that, then that's going to make a huge difference going into the rest of the season. Stick with Rayson. That's my opinion. I think there's something worth persevering with there.
Cool, thanks for that, Phil. So the key takeaway is that you are a Taylor Swift fan, but not a Wonderwall or an Oasis fan. So that's a good bookend to this podcast, I feel. Really good bookend.
A strange podcast that ended up being, anyway.
Right, so this week for Sunderland fans, you've got Sunderland Till I Die coming out tomorrow, or probably today by the time you've listened to this on the 13th. And then it's Huddersfield on Wednesday away from home. And then Birmingham away from home, isn't it? Have I got that right? Yes, 14th and the 17th.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Over to the Sunderland Echo for all of your latest coverage. Phil's got a video from the Stadium of Light where you can ask your questions to him. If you do have any questions for Phil that you would like answering during the week, maybe on Sunderland tactically, Michael Beale, anything like that, give him a message on social media, give me a message, comment on the YouTube, all of that good stuff, and we will endeavour to answer them because they've gone down really well and they're quite enjoyable to do, Phil.
Yeah, really enjoying them. Please, they are quite hard work as well for someone who is not particularly tech savvy like me. So please do get involved if you like them, and just send your questions in. We'll keep going with them, and we're very open minded about how it goes, aren't we? So let's just see what people want from it, get involved, and we'll see where it ends up.
Brilliant. Thanks, Phil, and thanks everybody for listening.